What is going on, everybody? Hope you're all having a good Friday. If that's when you're watching this, we are going to be talking about the main slate, going position by position. I'm here with Adam Peri, who we're thrilled to have aboard and doing some stuff with us now. So, Adam, welcome. How are you doing today?
Good. Ready to break down each position.
Nice. Yeah, we'll be getting into it. We're going to talk, a little. We'll talk each position, sort of what we like everywhere. But the sort of overall look I have on this whole slate is, you have some interesting value, and we were sort of talking about it a little bit pre-show, that I'm not sure that is necessarily the value that we want. And it's a little different between DraftKings and FanDuel, so we'll talk about a little bit of that. But any overall takes before we just start talking about each position?
No, I mean, like you said, it's interesting value because it's shaky. So like the top value now, we'll get into it when we go to running back, but it's this Taylor on San Francisco, who's supposed to be the guy with Garendo out. He got 0 carries last week. So, and he's like the spend down. So we will see. We'll talk about it more.
Yeah. And I think I actually think the Taylor thing is probably a little bit of an easier play for me to go with on like FanDuel, where he's like 48. So he's basically would like be the equivalent of like 3K on DraftKings. That's a little bit hard for me to pass up, but I definitely think there's pivots we can make in over here. So, look, this is my early exposure. Again, I've still got a lot of work to do on this slate, and there's still a lot of news to come. But this is sort of what I have. So looking at quarterbacks, you're going to have Richardson as the most popular. I love the Penix play. You can see I set him here as one of my core plays for the week. I really like it. He's 4,500. So I think that like as of right now, my exposure is highest on Caleb Williams, which I actually think is an interesting place to get a little bit sneaky, because the Lions defense is so banged up, and as bad as Williams has been at times, he still put up plenty of fantasy relevant games while he was struggling. So this is sort of what I've got. What are you looking at, and who are some of your favorite targets at quarterback this week?
Yeah. Okay. So a little bit of, we'll talk about this with receivers, but the Malik Washington value kind of opened up with Waddle out, with changes it a lot. That happened like 15 minutes ago. So before then, I was ready to come on and say that there's very little value on this slate. It's mostly suspect, and that you had to go pretty cheap at quarterback. Not had to, but that the cheap quarterbacks are really standing out. I still think that's true. I agree with the Penix thing. I heard the guys at shout out to ETR, because they do good analysis too. And then, one of them said like maybe Penix was the reason Washington was real good. Adunze's not really doing that much as a pro. Mm-hmm. Jalen Polk has done nothing as a pro, so maybe it was Penix. Maybe he's better than he's pretty high pick, but even better than that. So I agree with the Penix thing. I think he is going to be relatively popular. The price is definitely right, and the Falcons have an easy spot, right? So I like the Penix thing. I agree with the Williams thing. The Lions have that, like they say, cluster injuries, where sometimes you get a guy injured, you could replace him. You could fill him in. You could fill in that job in the division of labor on a defense, but they just have cluster injuries all over the place. So the Williams things make sense. I do think it's being reflected in the total of the game. I mean, 20 points for a pretty sad Bears team is tough. The thing is, that's nice, is people are going to play Gibbs, so that stack sort of becomes, that whole game stack can be pretty strong. So, that's what I think. I mean, I like some of the other lower price guys. I think Aiden O'Connell is fine against a weak Jacksonville D. Richardson's going to be popular, but I think for a good reason. Indianapolis has a good total, about 23.5 over under. So, and Richardson can run. Yeah. Running is a huge bonus for QBs. So, pretty much agree with you.
I don't know your strategy in general. My general thing that I try, I almost, when we have like the regular full slates, when we have the Lamars and Josh Allen and all that, I really try to avoid pocket passing quarterbacks. I really want to play guys who run a little bit. And Caleb doesn't fit that category, although he can run a little bit. Most of his running is done behind the line of scrimmage before he's making a big play or trying to make a big play happen. And Penix is not a huge runner either. But this is not a slate where we have like these high upside rushing quarterbacks. And that's why Richardson, I think, does stick out as being like probably the most popular quarterback this week. And I want to get off of that. I did want to just touch on the Aiden O'Connell thing. Like, I get it. It's a good matchup. And I do have some exposure, like I said, in one lineup so far, not that much. This is a guy who's, again, he's basically the same price as Caleb. As much as Caleb has struggled, Caleb's put up 6 games over 24 this year, or 24 or over. Aiden O'Connell, I believe, has 1 in his career. That feels a little like, I've seen this Aiden O'Connell thing. It's always a trendy pick every week. I want to get rid of this. I probably end up, if it wasn't Jacksonville, he would be X'd out of my pool. But I'm open to considering it just because Jacksonville. I just like these other 50 X 100 quarterbacks so much better. That's sort of where I'm at, I guess. The O'Connell.
I'd like to get exposure to both of them. I mean, the thing that's nice about them is they come with pretty solidly priced wide receivers that are pretty good values. And I'm going to bring up another guy, but in a similar way. But the thing about O'Connell and the thing about Williams is you kind of know where the ball's going, and it's going to Allen, Moore, Adunze. With O'Connell, it's Jacoby Myers, Bowers. You kind of have that answer, and that's why I'm bringing another guy up that I think you're gonna probably appreciate is Stafford. And we just dissed pocket passers, and he's the epitome of it. But the price is right. You could stack them with Kupp and Nakua. They're a little bit more expensive, but the ball's going there. So when that stack goes off, it goes off in a way you're much better chance of hitting. So
yep. Yeah, I don't mind the Stafford just because there's all this bunch in the range. But if I had to pick, I'm going to end up with Penix probably as my highest owned, and I probably will have Caleb up there as well. But I really think it's just very slate dependent. We don't have that many great rushing quarterbacks, and the other 2 that we have are in the same game, and they're getting no love. So that's the other take that I wanted to just touch on is that I am probably going to force in Jalen Hurts and Jaden Daniels at least a little bit this week because yes, the Eagles' defense has been really good. Washington's defense has been surprisingly better than most people think. It is going to be cold in Washington. But you talk about just raw upside. Look at the last few weeks, what we've seen Josh Allen do. Look at what we've seen Lamar do. I want to try and aim for that. So it's a really different type of build, but you spend a couple thousand more, and you're trying to get that 35 game that's going to come around every so often. I think that's another route to building, and I certainly will have some hand builds where I do like that. But I want to force in a little bit of the Daniels and Hurts just because the ceiling to me feels so much higher than everybody else. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you can never go wrong with those guys. We've seen it happen with Josh Allen where he's like the highest priced quarterback and he just puts up a number that it doesn't matter. Right. Yeah. The stacking options are pretty good with those guys. AJ Brown was great last week. There were just so many other receivers that were like really, really strong. But with Philly, I mean, you could pretty much know if Hurts does well. He's getting some running touchdowns. He's probably hitting AJ Brown. So the stacking options are strong. AJ Brown is not too cheap, but he's a little bit lower because he had some slow games earlier in the season. So 7,800 for a premier guy is pretty good. He doesn't project well, but in the case where Hurts hits that ceiling that you need at his price, AJ Brown's likely to come along with him.
If not AJ Brown, you do have a very cheap Devontae Smith coming off his best game of the season too.
Yeah. I mean, you could go that route, and not only that, you'll probably get leverage off of whatever percentage of Hurts stacks are out there because they're probably stacking them with Brown. You can throw in Goddard in there. I think is a nice way. The one question I had for
Goddard's out this week. Is
Goddard out? Okay.
Yeah, it's got Calcaterra.
Okay. Well, you could really get what's Calcaterra's got to be near min price.
3,400, but he hasn't really I think his highest of the season he got 10 fantasy points once.
Yeah, that is expensive.
Goddard's a real weapon. He's not a real weapon.
Yeah, I mean you could get 3,400 is expensive for a guy like that. I mean,
you think 25, but he's had.
Yeah, I was thinking he was going to be
hurt too much, so they had to price up. They priced him up.
Yeah. So my question for you, because he's showing up as a good value, is what you think of DTR on Cleveland.
This is the one that I have the hardest time with, and I'm just going to reserve. I don't know. I'm going to have to just. I get it. It's Cincinnati. It feels like you're supposed to do it. Maybe I'll just do this as a reminder. I like to put these little min max, and I always clear it and redo it anyway. But I just want a reminder that I don't want to. I want a non-zero of them. He does have rushing upside, and it's Indianapolis and it's Cincinnati. I think that's probably a good idea. Looking at it versus the Penix play, you've got more rushing upside. You don't necessarily need. I mean, you could stack him with somebody because Jerry Jeudy's been awesome, but I don't think you necessarily even need to stack him with somebody if you're going to play DTR because you're hoping for the potential of 2 rushing touchdowns. I think is the way you're looking at it, right?
Yeah, I think he sucks, but like you said,
Right.
There's potential for rushing touchdowns. There's also, the total is the total, and I think the market's efficient. But assuming some variance in things, I mean, Cincinnati's got a terrible defense.
Yeah, and these games with Cincinnati and Cleveland, because it's a rivalry game, and it's the games that I always like. They either are like 42-38 or they're like 13-6.
Yeah,
it's always one extreme or the other. So I actually think that makes some sense. The DTR call. I'm curious to see when the ownership gets more updated closer to the weekend, where DTR versus Penix end up, for example, because I do think that's an interesting point you made, and he is the rushing upside guy. But again, if I play him, I'm hoping for 20. With Penix, I think there's upside to get to like 25 or 30 if some things go really, really well,
Yeah. Okay. So I think, Penix is the better play. He's 300 cheaper. The game's he's a better play.
Yeah.
But he's going to be much higher owned. I don't, if he's 2-3 times the ownership, I don't know, just 33% of the time, does DTR outscore Penix? Probably. Does he score well enough that you need him? Maybe. He's pretty damn cheap too. So
yep.
Certainly a possibility there. The rushing upside's there. Cincinnati's defense is weak. The knock on Cincinnati's defense is like the rushing defense, but like that's because people have run on them because they know they can. Maybe they just have a terrible defense. So maybe there's some question marks there. But
their defenses look bad against even even the Cowboys. They don't only scored 20 in that game, but they like the Cowboys were moving the ball on them. Like, I don't know. They just look bad every single week, and I just think it's got to be the worst defensive football. It's really sad wasting a good Burrow season.
Yeah.
Anyway, we move on to the next position.
Yeah. Well, the last thing I'll reiterate is, we're talking about these like dumpster diving QBs, and you say, well, why? And the reason is because there's the only value on this slate is somewhat suspect value, and so that's why these cheap QBs are standing out more in our builds. And I'm getting a lot of exposure when I build on SaberSim.
And we don't have Josh Allen. We don't have Josh Allen and Lamar, so the cheaper ones are more viable, I think, because of that, right?
Yeah, that's right. There's just not a lot. There's not a ton of ways as of yet, unless some injury things change. There's not a ton of ways to spend down at the other positions.
Yeah.
So.
And by the way, even Rodgers against the Rams is totally in play, especially because I really feel like he's playing for his own ego right now, and you saw that last week. Him and Devontae, connection. Rodgers had his best game of the year. I could see, as long as they keep playing for his ego, if they are able to hang in there and potentially beat the Rams, I don't mind the Rodgers idea. That's the last one I wanted to leave with. I'm pretty spread out at the moment at running back outside of Jahmyr Gibbs. I don't know how not to be overweight this play. I don't know how not to have him in half my lineups or more. I think there's potential. You could talk me into some other guys, but I love Gibbs this week, and he is going to be clearly my highest owned running back. What are you doing at running back, and what are some potential pivots? Have you identified any that you like? We've got Chase Brown, but that's not really that much of a pivot because he'll be popular. James Conner will have some ownership. So anybody you like off the board, or what are you getting to right now?
Okay, I know who I don't like, and I don't love James Conner this week.
Okay.
I think that there are some some of the PFF guys that I follow that I think, have some ideas that aren't baked into the price and into the betting markets yet, are just pretty high on the Carolina defense, and pretty low on the offense, even going into last week. So I pretty much most totally faded Hubbard last week, which worked out well. I didn't take anything down, but did okay. Because of that. He was 50 to 65% owned in some tournaments. And I just think the same thing might hold here. So I don't love the Connor thing. Gibbs is unavoidable. Except that if we're saying that, everyone's saying that, and this ownership is going to be even higher. So I love Gibbs. The team's got like a 28-point total, and he's the sole guy now with no Montgomery.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he catches passes. He's electric. What's not to like? I mean, the price is there, but like he's still. So usually at running back, you sort by value, and you get these guys in the 5K range, maybe the 6K range. Every now and then there's a 4K. He's 7,500, and he's coming in as the top value, a little ahead of Taylor in SaberSim's projections, right? So like he's pretty hard to avoid. Yeah.
Yeah. Here's what I did a little. I just thought to myself, if they made Gibbs 9K this week, I think I'd still play him.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this guy, first of all, he might be the best running back in football outside of maybe Saquon and maybe McCaffrey. Who's I don't think they want to count McCaffrey anymore. You got to play football games in order to count. But Jahmyr Gibbs, just because he's sharing it with another great back in Montgomery, and they've got a great line behind, I think Jahmyr Gibbs is like is the highest scoring player on the slate, or highest scoring running back on the slate most of the time. The one I did want to touch on a little bit was I think I'm going to try and add some just manually to the Saquon. Saquon at this ownership, I think that something's missing for me a little bit. I feel like that game has potential to go nuts, and none of it's getting treated that way. So we talked about Hurts at quarterback. Well, the other side is maybe to get some Saquon. I'm actually going to make a little note here. I'd like to be well over the field, especially if it's really going to be 5% ownership on him. It just seems like you can play those two together. And you said there's not a ton of value, but we've got value at quarterback. We've got some value at receiver opening up with no Waddle. So I think you can double spend up at running back, and I think it's a pretty reasonable way to go. I get the Bijan Robinson love against the Giants as well. And I think look, talk about an early build idea. Maybe you consider a 3 running back build where you play Gibbs, and I think you can do it. I played around just enough with it. And I think if you found a couple cheap options, which we'll talk about in a minute, I think there's a way to potentially spend up for those 3 guys and potentially that being like the winning combination. I'm sort of selling myself on this. Does that make any sense to you?
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I'm getting to, let's see how much Saquon I got. I built right before that Waddle news, like 30 minutes ago. So it doesn't have. So I'm only getting 3.5% Saquon.
Yeah.
So maybe that changes if I had Malik Washington in the build. We'll talk about that. So, I just think there's so many other guys, but I totally agree that there are worlds where Saquon just has a need to have it kind of day, kind of like we mentioned with the quarterbacks, right? And we'll see if things change. His price is high. It's not like exorbitantly higher than anyone else. So I totally think you could do it and get away with it. Two questions, but one I had for you is what you think of Achane.
So I still want to see I have a hard time with this game because Miami, I guess technically they haven't been eliminated yet. They've got about a 2% chance to make the playoffs. They'd have to win out and have basically everybody else lose out. It would be a mess. I guess that keeps him as a potential for me. But I just like the other guys around him better. So I had to make some cuts somewhere, and he and Brian Robinson at this moment are my cuts. I don't play running backs against Philadelphia in general, so I'm happy with the Robinson thing. I think that's sort of where I'm settling in, is that I don't think that I'm going to end up with very much. It just added some for me when I made my last edit. But I'm not trying to get Achane. If I end up with a little bit of it, I'm happy with it. I just really like that Robinson, Gibbs, Saquon in that tier. And then if I'm going to spend down, you have the obvious Patrick Taylor play. But it's just Achane's not quite enough cheaper for me to love it. I'm still a little wish-washy on it. And it's running backs have torched San Francisco for what it's worth this season. So might not be a bad idea.
Yeah. So there's the one problem with Achane is he's 7,400 and Gibbs is 7,500. So are you really gonna play Achane over Gibbs? That's dicey. Now, if maybe there's some lineups with both. I got to about, what did I get? I got 6.5% of him. I guess the one thing I like about that game is it's true that Miami doesn't have much of a chance, but San Francisco just has those kind of cluster injuries. Like, I think that there is a world where San Francisco just has nothing. They scored 6 points last week. Their defense did do good, but like it's just a kind of demoralizing thing. And I think there's a world where Miami just totally smashes them. You know, you take Waddle out of the picture, maybe that opens up a little bit more for Achane too. So I don't know. I think maybe that he's a little underrated this week.
Yeah, it's like the two pretender teams to me with San Francisco and Miami. Yeah. I don't really have a lot of respect for either of them this season. But I do think he's in play. I just want to point out that Achane hasn't had a good week in forever. I don't think he's. You want to hear some crazy stats? Yards per carry, 3 last game, 3.4. Game before that, 1.7. Game before that, 2. Game before that, 3.2. I mean, what's going on there? Like he can't run at all. And because of it, like, I mean, yeah, he'll catch some passes and all that stuff, but Mostert's still there. Mostert's still going to get some carries. I don't know. If Mostert was out, I'd be a lot higher on it than I am currently. But we can move over to wide receiver and talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. This is well, you know, we didn't talk about Taylor.
I just think that I'm going to have to wait and see on that one. This is going to be a Sunday morning, 11 a.m. Eastern for me because I am not planning on playing much. I don't want to try to play him much on DraftKings. If I end up with certain builds that have to have him because I'm spending up for Hurts or McDaniel in those lineups, that's okay with me in a few lineups. But I think my current stance is to be underweight the field. I thought we sort of touched on that at the beginning. I think that it's hard to fade on FanDuel, not hard for me to fade on DraftKings. You can see
we were talking about that before we started. I don't remember if we talked in the beginning. It's tough. So on DraftKings, he comes up as like the spend down, and points per dollar, he's right below Gibbs. We mentioned at the beginning, he didn't get a single carry last week. It's unclear if he's the guy. The team scored 6 points before. He's just a gross play. But if everyone thinks that, we'll see where the ownership comes out too. He may be the guy that unlocks a lot. So
he's the only guy in his so here's my take. I guess to go even further with it, why don't we just take a shot and play Tajay Spears instead? Tajay Spears makes some sense. Look, what do you have, 30 last week? And again, yes, Pollard is ahead of him, but that team isn't playing for anything. Pollard's advancing in age. Tajay Spears will get a lot of the third down work and have the pass catching work. He had 7 targets last week. This is a game theoretically them playing from behind. So I think Tajay Spears is more interesting to me than the Taylor play at the moment, partially because I worry that it's going to be the other guy, the Israel, whatever his name is.
We'll probably get more news throughout the week. We'll see. We'll see.
And by the way, that might end up when all is said and done, the highest owned running back is a guy who's currently probably projected for 0. And that might be the Israel or projected for 3 fantasy points. Abanika, I can't pronounce the name. I'm just called Israel A or something.
Yeah.
I can't even attempt that one. All right, let's move over to receiver. Talk about some of these things. Look, you see that Puka's getting a ton of love, and why not? I get it, but I personally like to get different at wide receiver more than any other position. It's the highest variance position outside of guys like Jamar Chase. So this is sort of what I ended up with right now. Like my highest owned receiver right now is DJ Moore and Keenan Allen because I've got the double Caleb stacks going. But I'm well underweight now they might make in my high buy-ins the Nakua. I love Brian Thomas. I don't know that I want to play him at 20%. I'm sort of underweight that. Ridley, I have locked in on FanDuel, but I'm not sure what I want to do with him on DraftKings. So I'm pretty much underweight all of these top-owned receivers. It's really you have to go all the way down to Josh Downs before I'm actually overweight anybody in the top 15 receivers. So I'm trying to get different with receiver this week. How about you?
Yeah, absolutely. And one guy who's different, and I don't quite understand the projection on him, and this is maybe me not following football that closely and being more of a projections and trusting the Sims guys, but got Nakua at 8,000 projecting for about 26 fantasy points on average on SaberSim. $100 less, Amon-Ra St. Brown projects for 17. I know they have like a lot of weapons and everything, and the Rams are much more consolidated. That is a big difference. So and then I've got St. Brown
I
is
like what you're saying right now. Yeah.
Yeah, 1.5% ownership. They've got a 28-point total. He could get there other ways. Like he doesn't need to score. He's a kind of a PPR guy.
PPR. He'll get the occasional they'll run a weird jet sweep with him or something like that. Hey, he might even throw a pass. Sometimes he does that too.
Yeah, I mean, boy, I don't know. That seems like a nice play. The same with Jefferson at 8,200. It's a tough matchup in Seattle. He's Justin Jefferson. You know, I understand why his projection is a little bit lower. Jordan Addison's emerged as a much more viable secondary guy, taking a little away from him as an alpha, but like he's still Justin Jefferson. I don't know. I'm looking at those two as low owned, similar price range to all these guys' prices are bunched up pretty much.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then I agree with you on the Thomas thing. I mean, he seems to be turning into an alpha. He's got a chemistry with Mac Jones. They're throwing the ball a little bit more, so their pass rate increased. I've heard some people talking about. So he's only $500 more than last week when he was a hell of a play. I can get behind it for sure.
Yeah, and like I said, there's some guys I'm just going different this week because I can. I mean, this is a pretty wide gap of my ownership versus the field, like in general. And as I mentioned, I just don't see. I feel more afraid of the Brian Thomas in some ways than Nakua, because as you mentioned with Nakua, there's a bunch of guys in that price range that are similar upside wise. Maybe even you could argue have more upside than Nakua in some ways. So I think you can find you have easy pivots in Nakua's price range. Whereas with Brian Thomas, you could argue that maybe he's $1,000 too cheap. He should be 7,300 with the way his role is right now. So something to certainly consider.
Yeah. I think also if you do the Nakua thing, nothing's stopping you from pairing him with Kupp. It is so consolidated. I mean, Kupp at 6,500 is pretty exciting too. And I don't think the gap. I mean, the 9 fantasy point. I know Nakua gets some runs, and he's got runs along the goal line recently, but boy, it seems like a pretty big gap between the two projection wise.
Yeah, 8K and 6,500 too.
Price. So I think, and we talked about Stafford. I mean, you could play Stafford with Nakua and Kupp. You could play him with just Kupp and really save some money. Like you said, there's that variance at receiver. So I don't know. I mean, the only other guy that kind of looked interesting was Jackson Smith and Jigba. I think he's becoming the alpha there. He's a little bit cheaper. Their total's not as high, but he's becoming the alpha. And so, there's ways for him to get there, I think, at a pretty good price. So
but to that point, Metcalf is cheaper than we ever seen him. And as much as Smith and Jigba, I love Smith. I was on this one. I was since college. I actually had an argument with some friends because I was trying to argue he was going to be a better receiver in the NFL than Marvin Harrison. I feel good about it right now, but I also do want to say that Metcalf is just too cheap for his upside. And he's still going to be the guy who, he'll still get his 7 catches for 80 yards, and then he might have that 75 yarder for a touchdown on top of it. That's what.
That's what I was going to say. He is the type that could get there in one play.
Yep. And he's going to get work no matter what, because they're probably going to be throwing the ball against this Vikings defense.
Yeah, I like both those. I'm surprised they're so close in price, but I guess Lockett and Metcalf were always like that too.
Yeah, they were. It's just sort of, and also it's a little bit of a function of Geno and what he looks for. He's not a big thrower guy, so the wide receiver is going to get a lot of work. He doesn't really throw that much to tight end. He doesn't really throw that much to the running backs either.
Yeah.
All right, so here we are. We're on week 2 at tight end of I guess Benton Strange is going to be just the guy who absolutely crushes. Boy, I tell you what, with Brian Thomas and Brenton Strange being so popular.
Bobby, one more thing. I had a question. What do you think of the Malik Washington thing with Waddle?
I just manually put 10% of them in there right now.
Yeah.
I'm going to sort of I think my guess is I'll be over the field, whatever that number is. If that number gets to be in the 20s, I think that I'll probably jump off. If it stays, teens or below, I think that's something I have interest in. And I mean, the real one is, it probably benefits Janu the most, to be honest.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
I do want to get at least above the field on Washington as long as the ownership stays low enough.
Yeah, he had 6 targets last week.
After the injury.
So who knows? They may, Hill had 7 targets for what it's worth.
Yeah.
So, it's tough. It is the type of thing this week. If value doesn't open up, I know there's like Jalen Coker at 4,100 who is questionable.
Mm-hmm.
So like if no value opens up, I mean, he may be the type of guy who doesn't get you much, but the price, it's the price that gets you there, and allows you to do other things. So we'll see, and we'll see what he shows up as when the kind of the dust settles on that news. So anyway,
yeah. All right, let's move over to tight end then and talk a little bit about that. So Brenton Strange is going to be the most popular tight end this week. He had an absolutely massive week last week. And like I said, it's interesting to me that they're not giving Mac Jones, because Brenton Strange, he's the highest projected tight end. You've got Brian Thomas, the second highest projected receiver. Somebody's throwing the ball who's only 5,200. So I don't personally want to play Mac Jones, but I do have interest in I'm more on the Strange this week than I am on the Thomas, just because I had to make some pivots. But I really like the Strange play. I also think could be a good Laporta week. We haven't really seen that big breakout. He looked better last week. It was the closest thing we've seen to it. But look, cold weather, on the road, I could see him catching some passes over the middle. So this is sort of how my ownership is falling right now. I am currently not getting to the Trey McBride just as a way of getting different. I'm not guaranteeing this is the way I'm going to look Sunday, but my take is that there's not a lot of like psychotically great options. I mean, part of it, I really like Andrews on the Saturday games. Freiermuth's been good for his price. There's not a lot of things that I love. I've been doing a lot of double tight ends this year. I don't think this is going to be a double tight end week for me. What are your thoughts on the position and who you like in?
So first, you brought up something interesting, which is that Thomas is high owned, Strange is high owned, Mac Jones is not. And usually when we talk about quarterbacks, we talk about how to stack them. And if they're high owned, we talk about how to stack them differently. I mean, maybe the way you alluded to this, the way to play String and Thomas is to just play them with Mac Jones.
Mm-hmm.
He's in a dome. They're playing a bad team. They're throwing the ball more. Mm-hmm. Maybe we see he's 5,200. Maybe we left him out of our QB analysis. So that was my first thought about what you said. I thought it was an interesting point. Now, in the tight ends themselves, it's tough. It's definitely not. It's probably not a double tight end week, unless you have String in there at 3,500. One guy, this is same thing I said about Amon-Ra St. Brown, is Laporta, who's picking it up week to week. He's cheaper than the other top guys. Going into this season, it looked like he may be one of the top guys. He kind of stood out to me at 4,700 as someone not projecting well, not coming in as a great value, but as a tight end that I kind of like, and he's got the pedigree. So that's one that stood out. And yeah, that's what it is.
He's coming off his best game. He's actually hasn't. I mean, he's been hurt a lot. He's been hurt at times this season. He's not been as bad as people think. He just hasn't had these outlandish games. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Consistently that 10 to 20 range, but his price is down there where it's like, if things go his way, I could see a 25, 30 point game from him.
Yeah. I mean, I don't see why not. I mean, I'm surprised he's projected that low. The total is that high. The offense is not that spread out. They may run less without Montgomery, without 2 guys to run the ball. So they may have a higher pass rate, just given the roster situation. So he kind of stood out to me just qualitatively as a guy that may outplay his projection. The other guy, if you want a pivot off String that I thought looks halfway decent, is Ertz, especially if you're playing Daniels. He was a safety valve for him before not playing last week.
Yep.
He's kind of good PPR guy. He's cheap, and that kind of works for me, the Ertz thing. Now, as far as the spend ups, they all look kind of good. I mean, Bowers is always going to look good. McBride's really good, really talented. Jonnu Smith, we just talked about. So there's a lot there.
Is this the week McBride finally gets in? He has the most catches in NFL history in the season without getting a touchdown.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we used to say that about Jacoby Myers, I think. It was a similar thing. So
was it really Jacoby Myers?
When he was with New England, he was never a great receiver. I mean, McBride is a top tight end.
So McBride actually just broke the record. Like, he literally broke the record.
Did he really?
Yeah, he has no touchdowns this season. He has the most catches, and he has a chance to break it by a lot too. Like,
well, yeah, there's a reason he's the top projected tight end, and that's because of touchdown variance. Like, he could easily get 2 in this week. He's no more or less likely than he was before. So yeah, I mean, if that's gonna stop anyone from playing him, and he's a good play, and he's showing up, and let's see where I'm getting to like in 5,000 lineups, he was my most exposed, highest exposure tight end at like almost 19%. So
you can see I'm trying to go contrarian because I knew it's only the fact that he's popular that I'm not playing him.
Well, tight end is a good way to go. Is always a good place to go contrarian, right?
Yeah.
You get that one touchdown in the end zone for a cheap guy, and it works out. So.
Plus, I mentioned my love for the expensive running back, so I have to spend down somewhere. So that's why I'm ending up with as much strange.
Yeah. For what it's worth, I mean, I have in 5,000 lineups, I got 7.5% Ertz and about 17% String.
I'd like to get a little
this kind of early build. So, like, there are some spend downs. Hunter Henry shows up a lot. It's another guy you could play. Just New England could be putrid, but Buffalo can give up some points. So, that's another guy. And yeah, if you're spending up other places, those guys like Strang and Ertz are going to show up. So yeah.
Yep. All right. I've got to get running in a few minutes. So we're going to jump over to defenses and talk a little bit about that. And want to remind everybody to please click the like button when you do watch this video. And also I will be live at 11 a.m. Eastern on Sunday. I will also be live Saturday, but I'm not sure what time yet. So that's a TBD for me. All right, let's talk about defenses. Sheets always has the same rule, and I don't disagree with him. If you're playing a bunch of lineups, you don't have more than 20% of the defense almost no matter what. I agree with that. And the odd part is this week, the defenses that are projected best for value are the expensive defenses. So I'm kind of curious if anything stood out to you here.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's going to be – they stand out, but like you're saying, what Sheet said, you could kind of play anyone. Defense is a good place to get leverage off popular guys. So, I don't know if we see someone like Taylor really, explode in ownership because of the value. I might like some Miami. I think Carolina's defense has been a little underrated. That's just a kind of take I have from the analytics industry. But yeah, that's about it. Defense is a place to get different. You don't have to get different. We've seen with the Sims, a lot of times it is, depending on how the rest of your lineup looks. Because of course we're building lineups, not players. You don't shy away from that high owned defense. But yeah, that's about it. So I'll tell you, if you just run SaberSim right now, this is before the Washington news. It may have changed it a little. But I was getting the most Browns defense, and then it's pretty flat after that. But I got 17.5% of the Browns D, followed by the Bills and the Bengals. And those are the highest owned projected ownership. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a weird week. I really want to, like, in general, spend down, especially loving my spend ups at running back this week. So I'd like to try to find a way to spend that. That's going to probably lead me to the Browns, even as Burrow puts up big games. It's not like he's not prone to making mistakes here and there. So I don't mind the idea of the Browns as my spend down. I don't really love the Jets, although I guess you could use the argument of going across the country. Now, the interesting one to me that I'm going to force, actually, it's not going to be that as low owned as I thought, but I'm going to force in this Bears defense a little bit. Look, I know how it doesn't matter how many they score. It's just about Goff historically in the outdoors, in the cold. I'll take some chances with a 2,200 defense against that situation. God, I didn't expect, especially after Monday night, that I'd be coming in today talking all about the Bears at every position. It was not on my bingo card.
No, I like that. And the price is right at 2,200.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Defense is high variance. All they have to do is pick up a fumble, bring it in the end zone. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. The one one thing you could do if you're hand building too, if you just love the Penix thing and you're 50% exposed, just let's say like you could throw some lineups with the Giants defense, especially against a rookie QB, but things like that. Defense could be an opportunity to hedge a little bit of your exposures. Something to think about. One that also did not come up a lot for me that I kind of like is the Miami defense. The over-under is what it is, but San Francisco, 6 points last week. They're going all the way to Miami now.
That was a fluke game. I called that one out. Like, you can't schedule the late afternoon games and have them play for the teams playing Thursday night. It was just such it's a division rivalry game too. So it's like, I just think that game had a setup. That was the easiest under I felt like I bet all year long. I don't know if I would count on the Niners not scoring against the Dolphins, but I could see some mistakes from Purdy though.
That makes sense. The only thing I'm worried about with the 49ers is like again, those cluster injuries. Like, you just have such a banged up team.
Yeah.
Especially a running back where like, was Patrick Taylor even on a roster before they picked him up a few weeks ago? Like, I guess not. So I don't know. I'm a little bit worried, but trying to find ways to get to think outside the box with defense. But yeah, that makes sense. That was a weird game, but
yeah. All right. Well, it should be another fun week. Adam, thanks so much for coming on and joining us, guys. Reminder, please get the like and subscribe. Also, check out some of the packages. We've got some great deals out there. A lot of basically everything SaberSim has at just basically the same price almost, but you get all of our other content, all of my content, all of Goldie and Sheets' projections, a whole bunch of other stuff. Brandon Cruz for NASCAR, Chan for League of Legends, and Adam, it's been great to have you, man. So any other thoughts before we get out of here?
No, I did too. What you get is Discord, where I think there's a lot of really, a lot of really good insights in there, and ways to think outside of these projections. Like, to me, I'm mostly a projection guy, and that's the exercise of talking to you on these videos too, is it gets me to think about some other angles that may not be baked into these, and that's another thing you'll get. So
yeah, for sure. All right, man. Well, good luck this weekend. Good luck to everybody, and we'll see you guys in the Discord, and we'll hopefully see you at the top of leaderboards Sunday night.